Good afternoon and welcome to Atlanta. I'm excited to have y'all here in Atlanta, which is my hometown. And I'm also very excited to introduce our next speakers. We have Christy Slay and Shannon Knabb, and they're from Regions Bank. And Regions has been a customer of Degreed since 2019. In joining Christy and Shannon today, we have Degreed's very own Colin Pogue. And during this session, they're going to share with you some fascinating results of a deeper dive impact study, really focused on business metrics. And they're going to share with you just how Regions got such amazing results. So Colin's going to start by walking us through the results of the impact study, and then Shannon and Christy are going to share with us their journey, the lessons they learned, and their plans for moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Colin.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you all here today. I'm excited about this session because we'll be walking through what is really near and dear to my heart, and it's a lot of the facts and figures and the ways that we translate learning into dollars. So let me get right into it. One of the first things I'm going to do is explain a study that we did alongside Regions Bank, where we got really deep into their data and our data, combining those to understand the real business implications of what Degreed had been able to help accomplish with their obvious help over the past few years. And so first I want to explain the outcomes, and then we're going to explain a little bit of how we got there. So I have 7 items I'm going to walk through here today. So first, what we saw, and what we did was we looked at the folks that used Degreed and basically those that didn't use it very much or not at all. And we had thousands and thousands of observations in that user group. And we looked at the differences between these two groups over time. And we saw some really interesting things. So number one, we saw reduced attrition. We noticed that there were several percentage point differences between those that used Degreed and those that didn't. 5.2 versus 8.3. If you look at what that means from a value perspective, extrapolating the difference between those two figures and thinking about if the whole organization was retained at that same rate, that could be valued at $30 million, which is an insanely big number, obviously. So it's really impactful when you think about what that means. Second, we saw improved performance. We saw that they performed at a 14% higher on their performance reviews, which is really obviously a good summary of how healthy they are as a worker, how much of a top performer they are. We saw better engagement. The Gallup surveys that were delivered showed that there was a 14% increase in the Gallup engagement between these two groups as well over time. So again, a substantial difference. If you know engagement survey results, getting 14 percentage points improvement is significant. The next one is impacted leaders. There was even another subset of the study that the team did around leadership and what happens when leadership training is made available to everyone, even those that are individual contributors or just leading themselves. And what they saw was leadership retention increased by 2.3x. Also, they were 23% more likely to be promoted. Again, huge signs of health as workers and employees go. The next slide here, the final 3, we saw increased efficiency. We saw they prevented over $1.2 million in external design, course design costs. If you look at the pathways that were developed, what that would have cost if they had gone externally to have those created separately, via vendor and paid for those. We also saw lowered costs in general. We knew that there were decreased external training costs and CPE costs by the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So all of these, again, are building blocks for perspectives on what the real value of the initiative has been over time. And then finally, the business was really enabled in new and creative ways. So the quick critical upskilling for mortgage new hires during a time where mortgage rates were quite low, it allowed them to be very nimble in bringing people on board in a new and effective way to get them up to speed quickly, right? And how can they contribute to this new and increased demand over time and really immediately. So I'm purposefully walking through a set of business measures first. In a moment, I'm going to talk to a little bit of these kind of traditional measures that we might hear more about. But before we shift to that, I'd love to hear you guys. Like, what were your feelings? We worked together on this a lot, but I'd love to hear just a summary quickly on, what were your insights? What were your takeaways from this information?
we were incredibly excited. Those are metrics that matter a lot to us, and we felt like those would be the metrics, but we didn't know, and seeing it proved out was really, really nice. And one of the questions is always, does Degreed create strong performers, or does Degreed support strong performers? And I don't know. I suspect it is somewhere in between those two, but I don't know that I care, because it has a super strong impact and means a lot to the organization.
Absolutely, and I would say from a learning and development perspective, it really proved out that Degreed is such an incredible tool, and it empowers our L&D associates to be able to create and curate amazing content that our associates really benefit from.
Well, and I was thrilled just on their behalf to see the hard work that they had led over the past years really culminated in some awesome measurable benefits that weren't just interesting L&D metrics, right? They were also metrics that mattered for a broader set of stakeholders within the organization. So cheers to you guys for that great work that I was not a part of in the past, but that you can really kind of wave that flag of success. There were a lot of other measures we looked at, connected to more conventional L&D measures. For example, we were able to show that the LMS alone had 6 fewer different learning modalities than the LXP, right? Books, events, podcasts, posts, tasks, and videos beyond those they would have had available otherwise. Also seeing the top in-demand topics, right? Just at a quick glance, looking at what the search terms were, if you group those, I always say, Google knows a lot about us because of our curiosities and what it is we're looking for all the time. But even in a real rudimentary way, it helps us understand what is in demand by the folks in the field, what they're searching for. We saw thousands of associates adding more than 2,000 distinct skills, over 30,000 skills in total, which was really fascinating, to start generating that skill data that you can then have some insights and decision-making driven off of. Also, logging completions from 755 distinct sources, totally separate from the LMS, totally separate from compulsory learnings, right? And then we saw over 50% of the content views, not completions, but views, which were important to the team, understanding not only what was completed, but what was looked at. 50% of those were unrelated to the LMS at all. So just showing the diversity and the depth that the LXP can drive. And then lastly, more traditional activity measures were enabling hundreds of users to share content with their peers. And we saw an interesting kind of substat here that showed that content that was shared by peers was completed at a rate of 21%, right? And if you looked at internally kind of admin distributed content, that was only completed at a rate of 2%. And so it's no surprise as well, if you think about it, we care about what our peers are doing. We care about what our mentors are doing. We care about what our teams are doing. And so facilitating that sharing and seeing the impact that has on consumption and on the behaviors associated with that, I think were really exciting for us. So I think one of the main points we wanted to make by sharing these 2 bits of content was to show we can actually connect some of what happens from a learning perspective, right, into what matters for a broader set of stakeholders in the organization and how you can quantify those things, not leaving out in the cold the typical learning measures and some of those, but by themselves, they're not as powerful as they are in conjunction. So coupling those, I think, is really powerful. So now that we've talked a little bit about the outcome, Shannon, talk to us about Regions Bank. Give us some context on the company, the industry. Obviously, it's in the news a lot these days, but we'd love to hear from you some of the, just a summary of the company.
Sure. So Regions Bank is based in Birmingham, Alabama, just a couple of hours west of us, and we have about 20,000 associates. We operate across 12 states. That includes the Midwest, Southeast, and Texas. We really have been through a lot of transformation, as many of you have, over the last few years. In 2018, the organization went through a huge transformation initiative. And what this really precipitated was an evolution in how HR operates, how L&D operates, as well as how the bank as a whole operates. So in HR, to support both of our associates as well as the organization, we went from a generalist model to a COE model. And then at the same time, we had L&D evolving. And one of the things that we had to figure out was how do we provide learning to our associates in that new environment? So we started to look at LXPs, and that was 2018, and in 2019, we launched Degreed as our partner. So also along the lines of evolution, our Build the Best Team strategic initiative, which is a bank strategic initiative, was something that learning and development really kept at the center of our cornerstones as we were thinking about that evolution. We needed to provide personalization of learning. We knew that associates would want to learn in the flow of work, so we had to figure out how do we handle that across associates in branches that are face-to-face with customers, associates who were in a virtual environment at the time, and then associates who were at their desks. So we had to adapt greatly for that. And again, went live, and we started upskilling associates from there.
That's fascinating, and I love some of that history. I'm always a kind of a context person, so for me, it's, I think, important to understand where we're coming from there. So I think now that we've talked about outcomes and a little bit of the context, Christy, talk to us about things you might have learned in the process. You know, maybe in particular things that you're really glad that you did.
Yeah, absolutely. There were some, and I'll just highlight two things that I'm really glad looking back that we did and that we were able to do. One was a phased approach to rolling out Degreed. We wanted to really get in there and figure out what was working, what wasn't, and make the tweaks we needed before we rolled out to a larger population. After hearing some of the stories yesterday of a 3-week launch, a 6-week launch, I'm extraordinarily grateful we were able to do that. But some of the things that we did with the phased rollout is we were very intentional in picking the groups that we were rolling out to. We rolled out to about 1,200 associates in 4 different groups. And we tried to find groups that would represent as many of the region's learning personas as we could, and then had a really high-touch approach with them. Met with the leaders of the departments and talked to them about what learning is important to you. We curated pathways for each of the groups. And then we did demos all through their organizations. And then we watched and we talked to them. And we went back, we got feedback from the learners, feedback from the leaders. We watched what tickets were coming in, and we watched what their behavior was. So they did the pathways, but what else were they doing? And that helped to inform a few things as we did our larger rollout. We enhanced our instruction. We identified some champions. It was a really good lesson for us. I'm glad that we did it. We turned on some providers, turned off some other providers, and then rolled out to 10,000 folks. So the second thing that happened out of that pilot that we thought was very interesting and we put into place before we rolled out was we heard a lot of subject matter experts saying, hey, we really want to be able to use Degreed, to publish pathways. And at the time, we didn't have anything conceived as how we would do that. So we created some guidance and some processes for them to gain permissions. And those groups that have subject matter experts that build pathways tend to be our more engaged groups. So really pleased that we did that.
Yeah, that is awesome. Shannon, anything you'd add?
You know, as someone who was in the wings supporting the launch, I would say that really communication. That was really what made it very successful and created the buy-in and created demand from other associates across the bank who didn't quite yet have access. So the communication was absolutely key.
Oh, that makes great sense. Okay, that's the things you're glad you did. You want to go a little to the dark side with us and talk about maybe some things you would have done differently, or maybe even you would coach others to do differently had they been in your spot a few years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fairness, I'll only choose 2 of those.
Okay.
I think, and you'll see our team on the screen, and if you look at the L&D roles that supported it, I think those are absolutely Right. The core team was comprised of a person who understood the data, what was coming over from our HRIS into Degreed so we could get our groups, auto groups correct. A learning technologist, absolutely critical. Team lead was important. Marketing specialist, again, critical. And a project manager. And as Shannon mentioned, we had other groups in L&D supporting us as well, doing the curation. So it sounds like I'm saying that was good. That was good. But what we did was approached it as an L&D initiative. And really, I think it would have been a lot better if it had been an HR initiative. And I think it would have been even better if it had been an organizational initiative. So I think what we could have done is also expand that core team. We partnered with corporate communication, we partnered with our HR group, we worked with technology, and we definitely worked with others in L&D. But I feel like if that core team had more folks from around the bank involved, even someone from the business, we would have opened some lenses that we hadn't looked through before. So that's one thing. And then a second thing, and Shannon said that we did communication great, and I think we did well. and not to contradict her, but I don't think you can do too much. I think communication and marketing, I think thinking of alternate ways. You know, we used a lot of our standard channels, but I think you've got to be creative.
Yeah, that's fascinating. No, there's always that tension, right, around how do you do it and how well do you do that. Shannon, if you do think about kind of the broader communications and promoting Degreed in particular, talk to us a little bit about the kinds of things that you've seen have been successful in getting people connected and engaged.
Sure, I've got a couple of examples. One in particular everyone is very familiar with, and that was COVID. When COVID-19 came into existence and everyone was sent home, we had to pivot very quickly as an organization. We were, I would say, probably 98% on site. So it was a big shift in a very quick period of time. And we've heard from others the last couple of days that you had to go from in-person suddenly to virtual and online, and Degreed really helped us be able to do that. The other thing that we did is as we were gathering insights from across the organization to help managers and leaders be more effective in that environment, we were able to curate and create content, pathways, and plans that really helped meet those needs. So we had one, how do I meet with my clients virtually? I've always done this face-to-face where we could shake hands, and that's impactful. How do I go about changing that now to continue to have impact? How do I lead a team? How do I manage, coach, and develop people that I can't sit next to and hear all day while they're working with clients? So those were a couple of examples that we used that we found were very helpful for our associates and for our leaders. The next example, a little more recent, near and dear to my heart, something called Leadership Development for All Associates. So we were challenged to think about leadership development differently when our new CLO started back in 2021. And we did listening tours, we did DE&I listening tours, we had focus groups. We also were able to leverage our associate engagement result verbatims. And what we discovered is that almost every associate really had a hunger for more development in the leadership space. Previously, our organization focused on our approximately 3,000 people managers. So everything was formal program and it was in classroom learning with a little bit of leveraging Degreed, but we hadn't really leveraged it as we could have until we had to scale that solution. So fast forward, we now decide we want to offer leadership development to all associates, all 20,000 associates. So we had to be able to scale this appropriately. So we jumped in, we worked with our curation partners and the rest of L&D to be able to do things through pathways and plans. So we started with a week every week for a month, we had a focus topic, something around leadership. And we kicked it off during our Associate Appreciation Week. We had a ton of communication, most of those traditional channels, but we also leveraged business group leaders to funnel the excitement down that this was a way that we were investing in our associates. So we had podcasts, we had videos, we had quick courses, everything that you could possibly fit into a pathway or a plan, we did. And we got tremendous results from those associates. So fast forward to almost a year later, simultaneously while that was going on over the course of a year, we were also in the background creating a new leadership development framework with competencies that we've been able to roll out and leverage, again, our curation team to help build those out to really have that acumen building for associates learning these new competencies.
Wow, that's so important. That's awesome to hear. And, Christy, talk to us a little bit about what we have here, because I love this slide, but I also love, you were summarizing it to me earlier, so walk us through this.
Absolutely. So our technology group, and we've heard this before from others, was looking to upskill. And our learning architect assigned to that group worked with them, all the different leaders inside technology, to identify the skills that the associates were going to need in the next 1 to 3 years. And then we partnered with one of our other learning vendors to create those channels, pathways, and we ended up branding it as Training Tuesdays. You heard 5-Minute Mondays, which I love. So I guess a recommendation is a day of the week and a time. And do it because you'll see the spikes on Tuesday. 20 times more training happened on Tuesdays than any other day of the week. And it happened a lot because of that leadership buy-in. The leaders were getting reports weekly, and they were holding the associates accountable for completing that. And we have changed leadership. They're still upskilling, but in a different approach. But periodically, I'll still pull the learning report to see, and you'll see those spikes on Tuesdays still, which is really a neat thing, I think.
Why were Tuesdays chosen?
I think the alliteration.
That works. I love to see that, and the data speaks for itself, right? What a beautiful picture of the impact it makes when you really push something and the engagement that's driven from that.
Absolutely.
And how about some of the personalization aspects?
Yeah, last year we were challenged to do personalization of learning at scale. And we tried I'll talk to 2 different things we tried. You'll see that in 2019, we didn't do much in the way of personalization with our continuing education credits. As a bank, we have a lot of associates with certifications and designations, and they have to take continuing education credit to keep those updated. So we realized that a lot of our partners in learning had continuing education opportunities. So our associates weren't having to go outside of the bank or look for free opportunities or go on their own to find that. So we decided, wait, this is a really great opportunity to meet a need. And we were able this year to pull certification reports from Workday to see where all of the associates who had identified as having a certification or a designation, we mapped those to the continuing ed courses that were available from our vendor, and then created learning plans for each of those, and sent a personalized postcard to each associate who needed continuing ed to maintain their certification. And it was a 214% increase in the number of hours, or credit hours earned.
That's
so
awesome.
A really big success.
That is awesome. Well, good. And now that, Shannon, tell us about the organization too. I'd like to hear how over time maybe the L&D org has changed or you guys have adjusted.
So in 2021, we had a new CLO join the organization, and she challenged us to think about how we evolve L&D to meet the needs of our learners. So we took a step back and we began to assess how were our L&D associates spending time? What were the projects? What were the different elements that they were working on? How were they interacting with clients? And what we came away with was the idea to really reorganize, take our teams and make our teams the right teams for the right mini COEs, if you will. So where we had all been curating, we had all been creating, we operated a bit siloed in our approach, we came together and we created a couple of new teams. One of those teams was the curation team, which that team is our go-to now from a leadership development perspective. They're the experts. We're able to really leverage that expertise for them to build out what our associates are looking for at our levels in the leadership model. We also had our learning architects move into our strategic business delivery team. So you take the learning architects who work directly with the business group and the delivery team who is delivering to the business groups, and you marry that to make a really strong consultative organization. We added a design and innovation team, so we split design into its mini COE, and our innovation team really allowed for us to take on more strategic projects at the L&D level and have guidance and assistance to make those successful. So a big shift, but a really ideal shift, and did it without having to add any headcount. We were very purposeful as a leadership team to look at every time a position opened, where did that position best make sense to meet the need of the L&D organization? So a lot of simplicity, but also really smart decisions that help to continue to move our organization forward.
Yeah, what a great use of resources. That's fascinating. Well, what's next?
Goodness. Lots. More personalization. We are continue to look for additional opportunities where we can personalize for our associates. And one thing that's coming up that we're really excited about is we're going to offer boot camps and certifications. And when we do that, we'll go to Degreed. We'll pull the skills that people said they're interested in developing and be able to market those boot camps and those certifications to the associates who've indicated their interest, is one area. Definitely more marketing, more communication in lots of different ways. I loved Sarah's 3x3. We'll be using that for sure. But we've gotten more aligned with our HR team and talent management and HR operations. We are curating to support big occasions in the organization. So writing performance reviews, those things that happen so that the learners will get that content exactly in the moment of need. And then also creating stronger relationships with our corporate communication department. They recently started adding something to the bottom of articles that they published called Going Deeper with Degreed. And they're even curating pieces of content to support some of the articles that they do. So that's been really nice.
I would say a lot of leadership development, going from acumen building to creating personas for 3 different levels of associate in the organization, and building those competencies and skills out so we can help, again, all associates realize that they have leadership potential as well.
Yeah, that's got to be so impactful in the long run, too, for the organization.
Definitely.
And then skills. Oh, my goodness. We are going through the process of identification of skills for a variety of different roles, almost all of them. And I have been warned we are getting a ton of skills moving towards us in curation to start working out the curating towards that skills taxonomy. So excited about that.
Oh, yeah. Big things ahead.
Big things.
Well, I really appreciate working with you guys. It's been a wonderful partnership, and we will be documenting and publishing a case study connected to this, so keep an eye out for that in the future. And yeah, really, that's all we have for today. So it was lovely to have you guys up here. Thanks for the time and the answers. Hopefully, giving some insight as to how we got to some of these interesting results. And with that, that's the end of our session. I'm going to hand it back over to Sarah.